Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Metzia daf Samach Beis. We're going to begin on Samach Aleph Omid Beis, the second wide line. Quoting our Mishnah, Ve'ezehu Tarbis. So our Mishnah began in just last daf that there's a distinction between Neshech and Tarbis or Ribis. Neshech, as we said, was a din d'oraisa, a situation where it's a derech halva, of a charging interest through a loan. Tarbis is a din d'rabban, which is through a derech mekach memcher, through a business transaction, which in itself, not min d'oraisa, which neshech is connected to a loan, but nonetheless d'rabbanan. So just to remind ourselves, the Mishnah began by saying hamav sel behei dinarim. What is a din d'oraisa of loaning of interest? If let's say you lend 4 and your anticipation is to get 5 back, or so sayim chitin, you lend out 2 sov wheat b'shalosh, and your intention is to get 3. So in that situation, that's neshech. So we're now going to see in the Gemara the next part of the Mishnah, which says, "Is the tarbis hamarba beperis." If a person prepaid for produce, ketzad lokach himenu chitin b'diner zahav hakur v'chein hashar. So if a person purchases wheat for a certain amount of, for a golden coin, for a certain amount of wheat, v'chein hashar, and that's actually the market value. So you actually bought the wheat at market value for a certain amount of money. Amdu chitin belamid. Now it was worth a dinar zahav, which is 25, and then it went up to 30 dinarim. So in this situation, again, you bought the wheat, but at market value, and then all of a sudden it jumps up to 30. Amrulo tainli chita. You say, "Give me my wheat." Shani rotza l'maychan. I want to sell. V'likach behen yayin, and you can take wine. So Amrulo, the seller of the wheat, says, "Hari chitecha asuya salai b'shloishim," that the wheat is for 30. V'arlucha etzli behen yayin, and later I'll give to you wine. But yayin ain lo, but he does not have wine. So we're going to see that the issue is whether you have it or you don't have it. Okay. So again, v'ezu tarbis hamarba bepeiros, of a person prepaid for produce, which ends up you gain a profit that way. So atu what? Kol handi amrinan ad hashtulav ribasu. We're saying, what is ribis? Well, ribis is interest. We're telling me the case before, which is neshech, but that's not also ribis, that's ribis. When we use, in the vernacular, charging interest, we use the word ribis, which certainly you would think has to do with loans. So what does that mean? Only this is? So now the Gemara explains. Omer Ravavo ad kan shel tayru, mikan ve'elach shel divrei. As I said, when we talk about neshech, that's a din of a derech halva, of a loan, and that is a din d'oraisa. However, when we're talking about the language using tarbis, that is in a situation of derech merkach hamemcha, which we just saw in the Mishnah, where it's a business transaction. You want to buy wheat with money, but the problem is that even though it's not really a loan, it's not derech, it's not a halva, in which that in itself would be an iser d'oraisa. Here, there's also a profit that's being made, derech mekach memcher, in a way that it becomes problematic. So that's the distinction between neshech and tarbis. So fine. Ad kan yochin rosh of yilbash sadik, ad kan v'suloi. So it says, up until this point, yochin rosha, says Rashi, yochin ha'av shehu rosha, the father is a rosha. Yomos, he dies. V'yehena v'habein shehut tzadik inu chai b'hachser. So the Rasha dies, and the tzaddik wears a garment. So he says, what does that mean? Ad kan v'sulo elafil ad kan yochin Rasha v'yilbosh tzadik. Even in this situation, ad kan ribis katzutza mikan v'elach avak ribis. So what is ribis katzutza? Rashi says the kaif, when it comes to ribis katzutza, that is a situation where whether or not you're chayv l'hachzer. And Rashi says ribis katzutza, which is a more stringent level of ribis, the kaifenoi sabeis l'hachzer im toiba b'chayev. That if, let's say, this level of interest is charged, so then the Beis can actually take it away, which means that the tzaddik, the child, will not benefit from it. However, when we're dealing with a ribis, an avak ribis, in that situation, we're not going to take it away from the child, and therefore we apply the pasuk Yochanan Rosh of Yilbash Sadik. It's only when we're dealing with Shel Divreihem, because it's only Din Rabbanan, so therefore we say that it doesn't get taken away. Okay, because that's only called avak ribis, like the dust of ribis, which is not like ribis itself. Rabbi Lezer, ribis katsutza, if we're talking about predetermined ribis, which was stipulated already at the time of the loan, about I'm going to be charging you interest, yotzeba diyan. So in that situation, if such a loan takes place, so you have the ability to get your money back by taking this guy to court. And therefore, again, that's the reason why we can apply this pasuk regarding that the tzaddik will wear it, v'yilbash tzaddik, because it wasn't taken away. However, that's only the sheet of Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Yochanan is chayil. Oimer fil ribis katsutza nami enu yotzeba diyan. He says no, it's not true. Now, when it comes to even ribis katsutza, the Beis Din does not have the authority to be able to take it away. Rabbi Yitzchak, my time Rabbi Yochanan. Why does Rabbi Yochanan say that even by ribis katsutza the Beis Din can't take? Do you ever call the pasuk says b'neshach nasan v'tarbis lokach v'chai? So it says by neshach you give, and what by and tarbis you take and live. Lo yichya is kol hatoevos ela. You should not live by any of these abominations. So, what does this mean? Also lamisa nitan v'lo hishavim. It says that a person who does this, it's a toeva, and at the end of the pasuk says, Rashi quotes, "Mos yumos dam of boyeh." That someone who's engaged in this, that should be death upon that person. So therefore, if it's such a stringency that we're saying lamisa nitan, that we should curse this person to death, then we're not going to require this person to have to return it. And therefore, because of the stringency, it's almost like kamar b'rabina. We don't. It's not like it's a mamish death penalty, but nonetheless, it's a very strong avera. Okay, and therefore, because of that, it's not given over to hishavin. It's like, again, it's like almost kedei rishasa. Once you chayev some element of misa, so therefore we're not going to make you have to return it. Rav Ad Baravo Imar Al Tikach Mi'ito Neshech V'Tarbis V'Yoresem El Kecha. It says you're supposed to fear Hashem. Therefore, L'Moira Nitan V'Lo Yishavin. This is something which is specifically between you and Hashem, and therefore the Beis Din cannot intervene. So that's how we understand this. Rabbi Omer Meguf Dekra Shmiele. You can see this from the pasuk itself, which is the rest of the pasuk which wasn't quoted. Most you must dam bo yeh hukshu malvi ribus shvuch ushayvchi damim. We compare charging interest to murder. Ma shayvchi damim lo nitli shavay nach malvi ribus lo nitli shavay. Very poshut. Since we know when a person is sentenced to death, that's it. He's come up b'ramina. So too over here we say it's akin to it. So on this, Taisa says, Tema frak Taisis heichi mashma dam of bo aver de shvichas damim. How do we know this talking about murder? Oivia doini v'kama veros those shaychi shvichas damim ksiv demeyam bam. It says demeyam bam in many other places. So how do you know Dafka we're talking about misa of shvichas damim? Ayin Taisus. Anyway, so we have a few different interpretations as to why Rabbi Yochanan holds even a ribis katsutza, the din is you don't return it. Okay. Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak, my time Rabbi Lezer. Okay, so then why does Rabbi Lezer say that when it comes to ribis katsutza, it is returned? This pasuk is mashma that you don't have to return it. It's my time Rabbi Lezer. Never cross. We continue in Samach Mizim and Aleph. B'chei achicha imach. In the beginning of the pasuk, when it talks about ribis, it says, don't charge ribis, but rather allow this guy to live. So what does that mean? So it means that even if you do charge this guy interest, then you have a chiyuv to return it so that this guy will be able to live. What does he do with this? We have the very, very famous Gemara. You have two people on the road. You only have nebuch, one canteen of water. Not enough for both people to survive. Im shaisin shnei mesim. If they both drink it, they'll die. It's not enough. Im shaisin echad mehem magil yishuv. If one guy drinks it, then he'll be able to survive to the next city, and he'll watch his friend die. So Darsh ben Patayra mutav sheyishtu shnehem yamusu v'yir echad mehem b'misaso shel chavero. Better you should share your drink, so you both live a little bit, but you're going to end up both dying. Better than seeing your friend die. Like they say on airplanes, put your seatbelt on first, or put your mask on before helping others. Your life comes first. So what do we see from this? This is the drasha, that v'cheachicha has nothing to do with if you charge interest, whether you have to give it back. It just is a general concept that you're supposed to preserve life. This is question 1 and TB19, and the answer to the question is Lamai Asakra v'cheachicha imach hakoseh binyan de ribis. So Rabbi Lezer l'chayim ma'balakser beribis. And Rabbi Huda the chayecha kaidman l'chay chavercha Rabbi Akiva. Which is shtickle difficult to understand because v'cheachicha imach is talking, it's specifically in ribis. So then why would we necessarily apply, you have to think about why v'cheachicha imach should apply to this general concept that your life comes first. It seems more homiletic, but certainly a very famous piece. Meisvei, so Fret Gemara. Haniach lahem avihim moishel ribis. Let's say father left money of ribis. So the question is, what do we do with it now at this point? Because now we see this, maybe he should give it back. Now ribis, the kid knows it's ribis. And this is befair, she don't have to return it. I havihin chayav l'hachzir. But interestingly enough, the kasha is flipped. Who doesn't have to return it? The kid, which is mashma, the one who actually charged the interest himself. He does have to return it. So therefore, it's a kasha in Rabbi Yochanan who says that it's not returned. Where it says no, but dinhu diabuhu namula m'chayav l'hachzir. The truth is, not the son, but even not only the father, not the son, no one has a chiyuv to have to return this. So why does it mention the son? But I did it call because in the seifa it says like this: in part of a talis. Let's say the father left over a par, a cow, or some animal, or a talis. We'll hold them hamasuyim, or anything. I'm assuming in this context, Rashi says is shenikershu gezel. It's clear that this is a stolen item. Everyone can see it, right? You stole a grandfather clock right in the middle of the living room. Everyone knows that's not yours. You stole it. Everyone's staring at it. So because of that, it's a humiliation. And therefore, when it comes to that, because of the kavod aviyim, then you have to return that. Because everyone will look at it and say, well, what is this? It's not yours. So Tanina Miration, but did who? So it also mentions the case of the son, and to be able to contrast it. But the truth is, even he, according to Rabbi Yochanan, holds the man himself, the father, doesn't have a chiyuv. Even though he went with ribis, he's not muchayat to have to return it. Bahani mimnei kavod avihem mimachayevi. Understand? Are you telling me that you have a chiyuv to have to return this clock because of the honor of your father? Your father's a ganav, he's a gazlan. The only people you have a chiyuv to have to help and do mitzvos and return this item for are people who are oisim amcha. You should only be concerned about those types of people who actually do the mitzvahs. But your father doesn't do mitzvahs. The answer is no, not necessarily. Your father did tshuva. 1 second. When do you mean did tshuva? You have the gazelle in your house. Yasa tshuva, my boy Gabe. Why didn't he return it? Your father did tshuva moments before he died. He said, I need this thing removed. I can't believe I stole it. So he did tshuva. He just didn't have the opportunity to complete because he died before he was able to complete the maisa of returning the object, that which he stole. But the reality is he did want it returned, and therefore for that reason, the din is that you have a chiyuv of masi amcha to be able to help and preserve the covenant of your father. Meisvei. Okay, we have another kasha. Hagazlanim, Umalvi Ribis. When it comes to these thieves or someone who charges interest, Alfal Pi Shigavu, even though they collected, Machzirin. It says clearly you have to give it back. Now, Gazlanim Mai, Afal Pi Shigavu. What does it mean if they collected? Ika, what does that mean? Gozel, Ilo Gozel, Imlo Gozel, Gazlanin Karin Lahu? Understand? What do you mean collect? Collecting sounds like he has some rights to it. So if he's a Gazlan, call him a Gazlan. So I understand. If he's not, then you shouldn't be calling him that. So what are you talking about? El Ema Gazlanin Mainihu Malvi Ribis. It's not two separate things. It's saying someone who acts by stealing something, which is someone who charges interest. Alpha P should go b'machzirin. Even though he collected, you have to return it. So again, this is again a kasha on Rav Yochanan. We see clearly that when ribis is collected, there's a chiyuv to return. So the truth is, I can't get out of this one, but it's tanahi. So machlokas tanaim desanya. Now the chemiyah Rebbe Glazman Yankiv poitunes hamalve ves haarev neishiesh behen kumasei. So they pater the lender and the co-signer because of a kumasei. So my kumasei, lav mishum damrinluhu, isn't because we say to them, kumu hadruhu, return it back. Mechlal, which means what? The l'chayra, we're talking about, it's like a lav hanitak lasei, that this person has the ability, that's what Rashi says, havile lav hanitak lasei, and therefore he's going to be pater, namely from getting malchus. Now, even though you would think, l'chayra, it's a los asay, by los asay you're chay malchus, but if it's a lav hanitak lasei, if there's an asay that fixes the lav, so then the din is that you don't get malchus. So maybe when we're dealing with the person who's a malvin, an arev, because he has the ability to return it, which we clearly see, therefore it's supposed to be returned according to the shita, so therefore it's considered to be a lav hanitak lasei, and he doesn't get malchus. But mechlal, what can deduce? The Tanakama savar lav b'nei hadurinidhu, it's not returned, and therefore it's not, since it's not returned, we see like Rabbi Yochanan, there's a sheet like him. Lo, my kumasei likroa shtara. What does it mean, the kumasei? It means that they could rip up the entirety of the document. That's what it perhaps is what it's really referring to. And therefore, it says Rashi, oilam e malach im gava, if you collected the kol enu metukan b'chazara min amalkus. You're not going to be free from not getting malchus. It's not a lava nitakase. Behind the tani paturin, it says when you're potter, bishalo gavu. We're talking about a case where you did not collect. The hasam loy havi el shuma b'alma. Here you didn't actually do an action. You wrote an improper document to want to charge interest, but shishamul of neshech alidei tanai, you wish to charge interest, but it just didn't end up really happening. So in that situation, it says, Lav ashuma gredasa kopid, el ashuma haboli de gibui. It's only the situation where it comes to the status of collection. You didn't actually collect the money, ika kum asay, then likruye shtara. Then you could rip up the star. So therefore, because of that, at that point, once you rip up the star, that's the kumase, because you never collected it. You backed out before the entirety of the mistake took place. So that's what it means. So Mike Summer. So what do you hold? Ik Summer star. If you already have a star, it hasn't been collected. It's like it's collected. So then it's already like the isser was done. But avdu isseraihu. They already did the isser, because this document was already written, and therefore ripping it up afterwards shouldn't do anything. That shouldn't undo the mistake, and therefore maybe they would still get malchus there. V'lav kegabi dami, if it's nothing, ho ovid klum, and therefore there's not really much of a chiddush, and it's hard to understand why anyone would argue with that. So ksaver shtar hamlikvos lav kegabi dami. Really, if a document is standing to be collected but hasn't yet been collected, it's nothing. And therefore, if that's the case, I understand why you would not get malchus. But why would the Tanakama say on a shuma gredasa, then alone you would get malchus? V'hakamashmo and the shuma milsihi. It's coming to tell us this unbelievable chiddush, that actually even a shuma, even this indicator of writing this document, even though it hasn't been collected, that is still considered to be a milsa, a matter that is enough that you're going to be chayiv. Fine, and that's what it means. And elav mishum shuma hilkach, says Rashi, malvav oyev nami mitchilasin chayav mishum shuma. Therefore, the malva and the oyev are chayav, like right off the bat. They already made a mistake by writing this thing, and therefore, again, the question is, if it's ripped up, then it's a machlokas. If even though it's lav kagavui dami, do we say shuma's milsa enough to be chayiv, or it's only when you actually or it's enough that you could rip it up, and therefore it's like a lav netakaseh. Hakanam mistabed nan ve'elu oivrin beloy saseh. These are the following people who will violate a negative prohibition: hamalve, for charging interest, the lender; baloiva, the one who's the borrower; ha'ori, the co-signer; ve'edim, and also the witnesses. Now bishlam akuhu of an ma'asin. I understand all these people. They did something. They actually they were involved in a transaction of sorts. Understand the witnesses? They were just standing around. What do they do? The fact that even though the Edom really didn't do much, but since they were involved in the process of validating this document in which there's interest on it, so that's enough that they're also going to be held accountable. Question 2. B'man nechaku hatanoim im hamalvav arev loikin al ribis as far as havamina demari begava umaskan demari beloy gava. So how do we understand if it's collected, and there was actually money in their hands, whether or not you're chayiv? So in the havamina, it's whether ribis is yoytze b'dayanim. And therefore, if that's the case, then it's considered like a lav netakaseh. Well, maskana, we say, no, really it's lav kagavui. And the question is shuma milsa? Is shuma something in itself of substance? Okay. That was question 2. Weiter. So again, shema mina, shuma milsa, he shema mina. Omer Rav Safra. Kol, any situation, she'ilu b'dinehem moitzian, if based on the laws of the nations, they would, so Rashi, shel umois, shel neser lehem ribis, where ribis is not usher regarding them, but if nonetheless we see, when it comes to them, moitzin miloiva lemalve, we can take out from the borrower to the lender, b'dinenu machzirin mimalve leloiva. Then in our laws, we will return it from the lender to the borrower. Says Rashi, im ein lo mashkain, if let's say there's no collateral, alidei tanai shebneihem kagain ribs katsutza, so then in that situation, we could take it out of the lender's hands and give it back to the borrower. So there's a saying that if you find a case where the laws of the nations, that they will take monies out from a borrower to a lender, so then with our laws, we would take the money out from a lender to a borrower, namely if there was ribis, so then he has to return the money. Then bedinenu ein machzirin mimalv loiva. So whenever we would find in their case that they would not collect, so we also would not collect. Okay. Armle abayil Rav Yosef klolahu, is that concept a general rule? Vahari sa, when it comes to sa, which you said, if you lend money, you lend out a saw and of wheat, and he returns also a saw of wheat. Well, what's the problem with that? So the Isser saw is because what if there's price fluctuations in between, and all of a sudden, even though he's giving back the same amount of wheat, but because the price changed, therefore all of a sudden it looks like ribis. So Dibedinehem, according to those laws, Moitzian loiva lamalva, if there's a price discrepancy, we will take money out from the borrower to the lender and give it to the lender. in a case of sabasah, even though it's usher, we're still not going to, the din is, and this is apparently going to be explained later on, that the discrepancy, we're not going to take out of the lender's hand and give it to the borrower. So we see it doesn't always apply. So I'm like, inhu b'taris pikadain asli yadenu. So he said it came b'taris pikadain into his hands. Says Rashi, inhu ki magvu sabasah, when he was collecting one saw of wheat for another, min haloiva, from the borrower, limalva, and he was giving it back to the lender, lambatars ribis komagvule. This doesn't work like as interest. El bitaris pikadain hu beinehem. Why? The sama solo biyado. He physically gave him a saw. So we're not talking about a situation where, like sabasah, where it's bitaris pikadain. It's only when it's bitaris a loiva. But over here, because it's almost like I'm giving you a pikadon, a certain amount of saw to watch, and then you give me back the same amount. Now we still say it's usher, but it's not on the same level of lending out money and getting more money afterwards. And therefore, because of that, in machzirin, it doesn't have to be given back. Okay. In hu b'taris pikadon asli. So Emily Ravina Ravashi v'hari mashkanta. However, when it comes to a mashkain below nechaisa, says Rashi, if you are malve mois al kerem, you lend money against a vineyard, v'oichlas aperos, you eat the fruits, v'enu poisek, and you did not agree when nakois lo min hachayiv klum, even though you're eating the fruits, you would think that since you were eating this guy's vineyard, that you lend this guy money and he gives you a vineyard, and you're eating those fruits, that those fruits should be deducted. And in that case, you didn't do it to deduct, but you just ate it as like, you know what, he's still going to pay me everything back, but I'm going to benefit from eating these fruits. Now, in that situation, if you're engaged in that, which again is a mashkanta b'loi nachyasa, this vineyard, which is a mashkain, which was not, you did not deduct off of the loan, now, if you would have done this in those courts, and let's say the borrower ate fruits from the lender, so then the borrower would have to reimburse the malva, the lender, for those fruits that he ate. As we continue Samach Beis and Beis. However, interestingly enough, we don't say this din when it comes to the malva to the lova. He does not have to give it back. Why? Says Rashi, the avak ribasu. This is actually called avak ribas. Why? Kivan the zimnin shin oisin paris shakramim loikin. Says since there's times that it does not produce fruits in this vineyard. Loikin. Ein lo ribas katsutza, and therefore it's not considered to be ribas katsutza. Okay. So again, it's a question. We see that this rule doesn't apply. So this came in the B'tairas, a sale, and it was like a transaction. It was a mekach memker. It's not the same thing as a halva. So when it comes to halva, you have to return it. However, when you're dealing with this vina, you don't have to return it. So this cloud seems to be quite exclusionary. Excludes this case, excludes the case of sabasah. So anytime that we would collect from the borrower to give it to the lender, then we must give back the money to the borrower. What's that? Rabbi Elazar. All it's doing is coming to tell us that the din is like Rabbi Elazar, unlike Rabbi Yochanan, that when there is ribis that's charged, that the Beis Din does collect it back. Kol she'ilu b'dinehem ein moitzin b'yadenu ein machzirin ribis mukdemes ribis mucheres. So what is this kol she'ilu b'dinehem? in their laws that they will not collect it. Ein moitzian, b'dinenu ein machzir, that we will not collect. That's ribis mukdemes, that's advanced ribis, or ribis mucheres, delayed ribis. So, for example, if he gives the borrower a gift afterwards, so it looks like ribis. It's ribis mucheres. So you lend me $100, I gave back the $100, and then all of a sudden I give you some type of gift afterwards. That's called ribis mucheres. In their law, it's okay, but in our law, it is a form of ribis d'Rabbanan. Okay, and ribis mukdemes is just the opposite. You give something in advance before the loan. So in all these situations, it's still an iser d'Rabbanan, but the din is that ein machzirin. Okay. Ketzad lokach menuchitem b'dinner zahav akor v'chein hashar v'chul. So as we quoted at the beginning of this class, that the din is that there's an element of, even though it's a mekach hamimcher, there's a possibility that still is a form of an iser of ribis midrabanan. So v'chi ein lo yain. This is because he didn't have wine. So my hobby. So what's the difference if he didn't have wine? Mosanya in poiskin al haperos ad shietze hashar. So a person, says Rashi, in poiskin al haperos, says Rashi, litin loy mois. You can't give money, but kurchitin, for a certain amount of wheat. V'loimer loan, to say Tenehu li was seifsman gadol. Give it to me later on. You can't buy wheat, for example, but not pay them for an extended period of time. Even if you have at the beginning right now, that's not considered to be the market established. So continuing the Gemara, you're not allowed to do this until you already have the market established. Once the market has established a price, then you can make this arrangement. Because even though the seller may not have, but someone else may have, and therefore you could always buy with the money that you have someone else's stuff. So what's the difference if he doesn't have wine, but if you have money, you could have bought it from someone else? So Marabo Masnisin Babal Chayiv B'Demein Askinan, says Rashi, Shalo Nasan Lo Zeh HaMeicher L'Lekeach D'Meachitin. What happens? The seller did not give to the buyer the monies for the wheat. Shechayv Lo, that he owes. Sheyachzor V'Yikablim B'Menu B'Shil Hiyayin, and that he would go and collect it, take it back for the wine. El Bo Lasas Lo D'Meachitim Chayiv. He actually wanted to make the wheat his debt. V'Livsoik Al Chayiv Yayin, so that he'll be able to get the wine. Skipping a line, Di Havi Le Yayin, if he had wine, have a kinuyel me'achshav. It's like he owned it now, and therefore it's not a problem of ribis if it goes up. It's like it went up in his own rishos. But if the guy doesn't have it, but who lo kibul achshav mois, he didn't accept the money. Shenuch loimer yachol hu eknoisem b'damim shekibul nimsa shneim etzloi el b'halva be'alma. It's like a regular loan, and therefore that's the reason why it's a problem. Look at the sign. Hari shahaya noisem b'chaver mana. Let's say you're collecting from your friend 100. V'holach v'alman al garner. You stand on his vineyard by his granary. V'mertainli ma'osai shani rotzel ikach b'amchitin. So give me the money you owe me because I want to buy wheat. Armeloi said chitim yeshli shani noislecha. I don't have money on me, but I have this wheat, and I can give you the wheat. Say v'asilai kishar shel achshav. Go and take the amount which is based on its current value. And I will agree to it. That's how much I'll pay you back after 12 months, even if the price changes. So aser, the lav ki isura habo yodadami. It's not ki'ilu like it's in your hands, says Rashi. She'en zed doyimel when noisin iser b'shasha paisik. Here, it's a transfer of a debt, and it's not like monies were handed over. It's just a transfer of a debt to another. Even if you have it, that shouldn't be good, shouldn't work. Rabbi Masnisin Kedetani Rav Safra Baribis Debei Rabbi Chia. The Tani Rav Safra Baribis Debei Rav Chia Yesh Devarim Shehein Mutarin. There are certain things that are taken mutter from ribis. There's certain may haramas ribis, but nonetheless, there's an element of haramas ribis that it has the appearance or smacks ribis. Ketzad Oimrloi halveni mana. Lend me $100. Emily money ainly. I don't have $100 to lend you. Mechitim b'money yeshli. I can lend you, instead of money, I'll give you $100 worth of wheat. Shani nice locha. I can give that to you. So nasan lo chitim b'money gives it to him. The chazer b'lakhan himenu be'eser v'arba sela, and then he buys it back. He buys his own wheat back for 24 sela. So mutter, that is allowed, even though the price was changed. The osalasos can be haramas ribis, because it looks like a loan. Because even though you didn't really lend him more or less money, there was the interest in charge, because it wasn't really monies that were exchanged. You wanted $100 worth of $100. Instead, he gave you $100 worth of wheat, and then he bought it back for a different price. So therefore, it looks almost like it was a form of a loan. But in that case, we don't say it's asur d'oraisa, but it's haramas ribis. Hakanami ki gandi amar halveni shloishim dinarim. Lend me 30 dinar. Amar le shloishim dinarim ainli. I don't have the money. Bachitim b'shloishim dinarim yeshli. Ani nois locha. I can give you 30 worth of coins. I don't have 30 of coins. I only have 30 of wheat. So I'll give you that amount worth in wheat. Nas lochitim b'shloishim dinarim. So he gives it to him. And instead he buys it, he gives it back for 25. So in this situation, he gave him 30 and he's taking back only 25, right? So it's like he's doing him a favor. It's like the opposite, but nonetheless, it's not the same value. But in that situation, it's allowed even midoraisa, but it's haramas ribis. So isle chamro leloiva. If there's actually wine to the borrower, dinner, perahu de kashakumine. So it's like he's taking produce. The leislan ba. Be'ilo, but if he doesn't have it, kivan de leislan chamer, since he doesn't have the wine, vade mishkol zuzimine, he's taking the money in mexicaribus. So that's the problem. That if he doesn't have it, then it looks more like ribis. Amli Rabbi ihachi ten lechitai. Why does he say give me wheat? It should say demechitai miboile, the value. So tani demechitai, okay, that's what you should say. Shani moichrin, that I sell it. Shemacharti mucha miboile, I'm selling it back to you. Tani shemacharti mucha harichitecha suyas alai b'shloishim dinarim mikarinami hachi okim no lai. That's how much it was originally. Hachi karmelei b'demechitecha sheasisa alai b'shloishim dinar harcha etzli behen yayin. Yayin ein lo, and there was no wine. I have a habit dinner zahav hakur v'chein hashar katani. So again, because of that, perhaps it's a difficulty in the language. We're going to stop here, but that is how we're going to answer up until this point. Okay. Question TA 18. Let's see. Okay. What's the question? Ha'im mutter lifsoik al shar. Can you make a certain amount based on the established price? Kishein nois and mois. When you don't give money, elohay nois eloy mois. You are engaged in lending money. V'kaina b'demei hachayiv, and then you pay back the value of the chayiv. So as we said, be'ein lo aser. If you don't have it, it's aser. Yesh lo puta tanoi. Then it's a machlokas. Adkan.